up production. It's going to be challenging for the U.S. to continue to arm itself. He basically said if the conflict does go on for another 6 months, for another year, it certainly continues to stress the supply chain in many ways that are challenging, is his direct quote. Is that the Pentagon's view that if the Ukraine conflict goes on at its current pace and the support mission goes on at its current pace, that the U.S. will face challenges in adequately arming itself?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. So as you've heard Secretary Austin say before, we will not go below our readiness requirements as we take into consideration what Ukraine's security assistance needs are. And so as we work with them and as we work with our partners to identify the specific capabilities, the specific systems among the capabilities that we have, there's going to be a variety of factors that are taken into account to ensure that we can continue to support Ukraine while at the same time ensuring that we maintain our own readiness and our own stocks. Importantly, this has been an ongoing conversation and an ongoing effort from very early on in this campaign, particularly as we saw it going out for a extended period. And so you've seen things like the National Armaments Directors meeting regularly. In fact, they'll meet next week prior to the Defense Contact Group, Ukraine Defense Contact Group, and they have a series of regular meetings so that we can continue to work as an international community to again, one, make sure that we're anticipating and supporting Ukraine and its needs, but also making sure that we can maintain and replenish our own stocks of munitions. And so we are confident that we can continue on that glide path, working very closely with industry and working with our international allies and partners. I would say it's one of our great strategic strengths as a coalition is the fact that we do have such a large number of defense industrial bases to draw upon, as well as a motivated defense industrial base that wants to help us in that regard. So we are confident that we'll continue to be able to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, and we're confident that we'll be able to continue to maintain the readiness levels that are vital to defending our nation. Thank you. Carla.
Hey, I just wanted a quick clarification on what you were telling Tom about the Bradleys. When you say we're looking at weeks, not months, do you mean weeks for their arrival in Germany and for training to begin, or do you mean weeks, not months, for them to get to Ukraine? So
training should start, for the most part, my understanding is next week in Germany. Okay, and so on the joint maneuver training, combined arms training, Bradleys, it should start next week in Germany. In terms of, again, specific dates, you'll see the Bradleys arrive on the battlefield when they arrive, and we'll allow Ukraine to highlight that. I'm saying that, again, we anticipate that training will take weeks, not months, but I'm not going to get into the specific numbers of weeks or months. So thank you. Okay, Oren.
What is the U.S. assessment of the change at the top of the Russian military? General Valery Gerasimov becoming not only the chief of defense, but also the chief of the so-called special military operation, and Surovikin becoming his deputy. Is that a sign of just more dysfunction there or displeasure with either Surovikin or Gerasimov? And what does that say to the U.S. about Prigozhin's position at this time and Wagner?
Yeah, so certainly aware of Russia's announcement regarding the personnel shift, and it's something that we continue to monitor. Oren, I'm not going to speculate per se on how this might affect things on the battlefield in Ukraine, other than to say that it likely does reflect some of the systemic challenges that the Russian military has faced since the beginning of this invasion. And we've talked about some of those things in terms of its logistics problems, command and control problems, sustainment problems, morale, and large failure to achieve the strategic objectives that they've set for themselves. So it's something that we'll continue to keep an eye on. I would say, frankly, I think that the world would rather see Russia focus on withdrawing from Ukraine and saving innocent lives versus spending time on numerous management reshuffles. And Russian soldiers and their families would probably like to see that too. But other than that, nothing else to provide. Thank you. Will.
Two questions. So the U.S. has provided a variety of counter-UAV capabilities to Ukraine. Is there a mechanism for assessing how well they work and kind of the Ukrainians feeding that back to the U.S.? And if so, what has the U.S. learned from that so far, if such a thing exists?
Well, I don't want to get into specific effectiveness rates other than to say I think the results largely do speak for themselves. The Ukrainians have talked publicly about their air defense abilities and their success rate in terms of taking down, for example, Iranian drones, taking down Russian missiles, and I would say that from a U.S. perspective, that is accurate. They have done a very good job using the air defense capabilities that they had originally, and then integrating, Western capabilities into their system to do that. That said, clearly, Russian missiles and drones continue to have an impact, and so we will do our part to continue to support them, to provide them with additional air defense capabilities.
Without getting into what specifically has worked and how well it has worked, but is what's working in Ukraine kind of being incorporated by the U.S. and into its planning for counter UAS?
So I would say that anytime there's a significant conflict, the United States military as a learning organization is going to observe what works and what doesn't work on the battlefield and try to apply those lessons learned into our own joint doctrine and training. So I think that the situation in Ukraine is no different. Tom.
Hi, thanks, sir. Two different questions. One, a few briefings ago, before the defense bill was passed, one of my colleagues here asked about the possible impact of the vaccine mandate being taken away, which it has been now, on the ability to send troops into countries that require the mandate. I wonder if you could consider bringing it back in response to that at some point, if it would impact our troops going into countries that require a vaccine mandate.
So,
I have a second question.
Yeah, so certainly commanders do have a responsibility to ensure that if they're sending forces to a place that requires a vaccine, that's a situation that will be addressed, on a case-by-case basis. But we have a responsibility for the health and welfare of our forces, and so again, depending on the situation and the circumstances, it is incumbent on commanders to ensure that they're doing what they need to do to make sure those forces are ready.
So the decision, basically, generally speaking, would be at that level?
Correct.
Okay. My second question is, the British military put out a statement today how it's tracking the new Russian aircraft carrier that's in the North Sea, and it said that they're tracking it, it's a task force tracking it with NATO allies. Is the United States participating in that?
I don't have an answer to that, Tom. I just don't know. I'd recommend you contact UCOM, and they may be able to provide you some additional insight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris?
Two questions. First, we've talked a lot about tanks, Bradleys, combined arms training that enables the Ukrainians to effectively fight. But one thing the U.S. does is when it goes to war, it has a lot of air power. So is there going to be any discussion among all the members of the Defense Contact Group about providing Ukraine with fixed-wing aircraft?
So I think, as I mentioned before, the primary focus of the upcoming contact group will largely be on air defense and armor. That said, again, broadly speaking, as an international coalition, and certainly within the Department of Defense, we continue to look at the near, medium, and long-term defense requirements for Ukraine. And so while I don't have any announcements to make in regards to aircraft at this time, certainly we'll continue to take a look at the situation and consider Ukraine's security assistance needs.
And then my second question is, yesterday the U.S. and Japan said they committed to expand joint shared use of U.S. and Japanese facilities, but it was not more specific than that. Could that include an increased ability for the U.S. Air Force to operate from Japanese Air bases, or what does that entail a little more explicitly if you can.
Yeah, we'll have more details to provide in the future as the U.S. military and Japanese self-defense force staffs work together on those details. As you do highlight, without getting into specifics, whether it's the United States Marine Corps, whether it's the United States Air Force, the Army, and others, taking advantage of opportunities to be able to position forces throughout the Indo-Pacific region in a distributed way that provides us with agility, flexibility, and maneuverability to be able to respond to any regional threats.
But this is an ongoing conversation.
Ongoing conversation. Thank you. Joe.
Thanks, Pat. So we've seen in the last number of weeks, Bradley, several different kinds of armored vehicles are going to be donated to Ukraine. We're talking about different kinds of tanks potentially going to Ukraine. The Secretary of Defense leads the contact group. What's his level of concern or confidence in Ukraine's ability to sustain all these various types of vehicles, simultaneously? And to what degree is that a factor in decisions about providing them with more types of equipment?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, broadly speaking, logistics and sustainment is a factor in decisions about providing Ukraine with capabilities, not because we don't want to give it to them, but because, something that you can't operate isn't going to help you and, could potentially give you a disadvantage. That said, to your point, integrating all of these capabilities is a priority, and it's part of the ongoing conversation and collaboration in terms of how we train the Ukrainians, whether it's collective training or individual training on those systems. So that is part of the discussion, is how once those capabilities are put back into Ukraine, how they can best employ them together in a combined arms approach. All that said, I would also not underestimate what we've seen the Ukrainians do time and time again, which is take these systems and employ them in a way that's been extremely effective under incredibly trying circumstances. So there is that X factor as well that they've been demonstrating since this invasion began.
Can I have a follow-up on Pat Tucker's question earlier about readiness levels? I think we've heard a number of times from different defense officials, yourself, that leaders here aren't going to allow stocks to fall below a certain readiness level or what's required. But are those requirements static over the last year, or is that a rolling assessment, and have those assessments changed over time? Have folks here grown to accept more risk because of changing conditions?
Yeah, so I'm not, as I'm sure you can appreciate, I'm not going to get into specific systems and units and readiness and things like that, other than to say, again, I meant what I said, that is part of the discussion in terms of, as things are considered, there is always a lot of input and deliberation in terms of, okay, if we provide this, what would the impact be on our forces, on our alliance? And again, the Secretary's been very clear that we're not going to do anything that's going to prevent us from meeting our security commitments worldwide. And so, again, Russia invading Ukraine has presented a significant challenge not only to Ukraine, but to the international rules-based order. And so I think everyone collectively worldwide understands the importance of this task and the fact that we've all got to work together to make sure that we can sustain the support to Ukraine because of the consequences if we don't. And so again, as I highlighted before, I think we're very confident that we have the relationships, we have the network, and we have the capability and capacity worldwide to work together to ensure that we can meet Ukraine's security assistance needs, while at the same time working very closely together to make sure we can meet our own national defense requirements. Thank you. All right, let me just do a few more, sir.
Hi, I'm Peter Martin from Bloomberg News. I wondered if I could follow up on the M1 question again, and specifically you talked about the importance of logistics and sustainment. how do you see that? How does that impact Pentagon thinking on whether or not to provide the M1 to the Ukrainians? Do you think that's something they could effectively integrate into their operations, or that it would simply be too complex? Without again trying to, first of all, I'm not going to have any announcement to make. Let me just say that again. I'm not sure if you knew that, but the M1 is a logistics and fuel intensive vehicle. Okay, so that certainly is part of the equation. But again, we will continue to move as we move forward. We'll continue to keep all options on the table. But like we were just talking about, you've got to take into account, if I'm going to provide you with a piece of equipment, are you going to be able to sustain it, maintain it, operate it, fuel it, and is it going to be an albatross around your neck, so to speak, on the battlefield, or is it going to be something that's going to contribute to your combat capability? I'm not suggesting that the Ukrainians can't operate the systems that they're provided. I'm just suggesting that these are the kinds of things that have to be part of that conversation. So again, we're going to continue to work closely with them. We're going to continue to work closely with our partners and allies to determine how we can best support them based on the conditions on the ground to give them the best chance of success. Do you think the M1 would be an albatross around the Ukrainians' neck if it were provided?
Again, I'm not going to speculate about the future. I'm going to talk about right now. Don't have anything to announce. I mean, we provided $24 billion worth of security assistance. I'm sure no one anywhere would doubt our commitment to supporting Ukraine and the capabilities that we've given them, and we're going to remain focused on doing that and giving them whatever it is that they need at this moment in time based on the situation on the ground to be effective. Thank you. Let me go back out to the phone here. Got Sean from National Defense.
Thanks, Pat. So one of the problems that was, or concerns raised last year by members of Congress was oversight of the support to Ukraine. And obviously after Iraq, Afghanistan, there are a lot of concerns, Inspector General findings. Can you address what the department is doing regarding oversight of support to Ukraine in light of any lessons learned from the previous conflicts?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. We've been very public in terms of the steps that we've taken, working closely with State Department and Ukraine in terms of monitoring of the equipment that we've provided to them, as well as being responsive to Congress when it comes to oversight of the capabilities that we've provided. And so we will continue to do that. We look forward to working with the Congress and to the strong bipartisan support that we've received to this stage. Thank you. All right, let me just do a couple more, sir, and then back here.
Thank you, sir. I had a question on the Tomahawk missiles that Japan has been looking to purchase. I understand that there was nothing publicly released concerning this yesterday after the 2+2. Could we expect some kind of deal or purchase to be done today with Secretary Austin and Defense Minister Hamada? Or will there be an announcement concerning these missiles at all?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I don't have anything to announce regarding foreign military sales. I'd refer you to State Department on that. Thank you. Sir.
General, do you have any update on Iranian support to Russia? Especially recently, the Ukraine have said that Iran may send more drones to Russia in the near future. Any steps to stop that supporting?
Yeah, thanks very much. So we do know, obviously that Iran has provided drones to Russia for use in Ukraine. We do know that there's Russian intent to acquire more of those drones. I don't have any updates to provide in terms of, the levels of, or the numbers rather, that they've provided beyond the hundreds we've talked about before. And again, working with the interagency on, what types of sanctions might be applied to prevent Iran from doing that. But I don't have anything beyond that. Thank you. All right, time for one more, and then we'll call it a day. Yes, ma'am.
So just to go back to what the Secretary of the Navy said, so beyond the Secretary of the Navy, multiple comments were made by Navy officials about industry's timelines and delays in industry. Is that a concern shared by the Pentagon? And is there any concern that supplies to Ukraine is being prioritized over supplies for the United States military?
Again, we're not going to do anything that's going to prevent us from being able to meet our national security requirements. And as I highlighted, the Department of Defense is working very closely with the industry to identify what our needs and our requirements are, and we're confident that, given the robust industrial base that we have, that we'll be able to work through those challenges and make sure that we can replenish our stocks, in addition to working closely with our allies and partners around the world on the same problem set. So thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.